natural selection broadly, right? So we talked about predation and environmental factors influencing evolution by natural selection. But you can also have something called sexual selection. So what is that? Sexual selection is defined as a subset of natural selection where traits that increase mating success are favored, even if they reduce the survival of individuals. That's kind of maybe counterintuitive at first, because you're always used to hearing like survival of the fittest, right? Evolution, we gotta survive. Yeah, of course you need to survive, but you need to survive in order to do what? Just for the sake of surviving? No, you need to survive to be able to reproduce. So because of that, this emphasis on reproduction, you can have natural selection occurring between members of different sexes or within the same sex. So these are the, I guess, terms for that. We have inter versus intrasexual selection. This is maybe reminiscent of the vocab that you guys had last semester when we talked about inter versus intramolecular forces. So don't let them, like the words scare you. Basically it's like, okay, selection within a sex, right? So intra is within and inter is between or across. So yeah, intrasexual selection is competition between individuals of the same sex, usually males, and they compete for access to mates. An example of this that you guys probably are familiar with are male white-tailed deer that use antlers to compete for mates during the mating season. They kind of like battle like this. Intersexual selection is when the selective pressure is being applied like across sexes, so between males and females. One sex, usually females, selects mates based on their preference for a certain trait. For example, female bird of paradise select for elaborate male mating displays, which is here. This is a male bird of paradise. That's the female looking at him, seeing if he is good enough. But why? Again, why? Why is there a difference in selection between males and females? Why don't the female deer grow antlers and start like competing for mates? Why doesn't the male bird of paradise say, you know what, I'm tired of doing all these displays. Why don't you do it for once? And if that happened, the female would be like, okay, what's your problem? And just go find another male, right? It wouldn't work. But why? Why doesn't that work? Why don't we see that? It all relates back to this concept of anisogamy. So what is anisogamy? Anisogamy refers to the difference in gamete size between the sexes. Right? So here's an image of sperm and egg cell, sperm cells and an egg cell. You can see crazy difference in size, right? So egg cells actually, I think, are the largest cell in the human body, so much so that you can even see them with the naked eye if you look closely. Much larger than sperm cells. So males produce many small, mobile sperm that are easy to produce, they're cheap. Females, on the other hand, produce few, large, nutrient-rich eggs that are costly to produce. So I guess a little bit of like nod to meiosis here. So usually when I draw meiosis, it's in the context of chromosomes and all of these things. And I don't really pay attention to the size of the circles that I draw, but this time we're going to. So I hope that works. So we have a big cell. We start out, maybe this is spermatogenesis. And then it divides into two daughter cells, meiosis 1, and then these split into 4 cells, and you get 4 haploid cells for every 1 progenitor cell, right? This is meiosis. Well, it's a little bit different in the case of making eggs, because instead of the cytoplasm and the chromosomes and all of the ingredients dividing nice and evenly between these different cell lineages, what happens is you get actually a concentration. So this will be like small, and then this side, it's small. So first you have like the first initial concentration, and then these are even smaller, and then this, it's even bigger, right, as it divides into 2. So what you result in at the end is you have 3 of these things that are called polar bodies. They're discarded, they're not used. But then you have one really large gamete that took all of the resources for each round of this division. So that's kind of the mechanism behind this. How does this drive sexual selection? Well, because of this fundamental difference, males and females face different reproductive pressures, leading to the evolution of distinct mating strategies and sexual selection mechanisms. Sometimes sexual selection can be so strong that it overpowers other agents of selection or other selective pressures, like predation. What do I mean by that? So here is an example that I picked. It's kind of near and dear to our heart. This is a Tungra frog. Mike Ryan in my department has been researching these frogs for like 20 years. A lot is known about them. This is a male, and you can see that his chest is puffed out. If you look closely, you can see the ripples in the water. That's from him like calling. He's like screaming out loud as he can to attract, so the sound travels and attracts females that will be recruited to come mate with him. But if you call too loudly, you make yourself vulnerable. These frogs are preyed upon by these bats. And so if the male is just sitting there yelling, right? It's like, hey, bats, come eat me. They don't really care, right? I mean, of course they do, but in terms of selective pressures, the drive to call to females to maximize reproductive success kind of outweighs the risk of making myself vulnerable to predators. So that's kind of interesting. It's not always quite cut and dry, oh, we gotta survive at all costs. So this is an example I wanna show you guys, if I can get to it, of where I think sexual selection is like kind of gone crazy.
He's doing a practice display, which these males do a lot again and again for the hopes of getting it right when the female is there. But notice where he pauses. He does this twitching and he's waggling. Now, if the female were there, the question is what would this really look like? So here's the view from above, looking down. And so, of course, we knew it was going to look different, right? So, it wasn't too much of a stretch of the imagination to think that it wasn't going to look the same as it looked like from the ground view that we had been, looking at for so many years. But I don't think we were quite prepared for how different it would look, even at this point. So he comes out, the female's looking at him, and it looks nothing at all like a ballerina dancer. And in fact, had we actually looked at this display from the perspective from which it had evolved, right? And that's the perspective of the female who's the chooser here in this. We probably would have called it the wobbling ovoid display or something like that, not the ballerina dance display. So let's just take a look at this again, because there's something even more remarkable than just the shape of that male from above. Here's two cameras that are synced. There's the wide one on your right and the female's view on the left. There's better light here, but no female there. But the question is what's going to happen when he does that head waggling thing? So there's this incredible flash of these iridescent feathers on his breast shield. And then what he does is he plunges his head down like this and his breast goes up. And it's very...
You can also see, if you look closely, maybe back up for a second. I want to point this out too. In addition to having this like...
But the question is what's going to happen when he does that head waggling thing?
Pause. You see this little they kind of discovered this by this video. They explain it, as we go on. But there's also iridescent feathers behind. This looks like just an oval, right? It doesn't even look like a bird. There's many species of these birds. Each of their displays is more elaborate than the next. Collectively, they're called the bird of paradise. It's an extremely speciose clade. So, I think that's a good example of sexual selection. So I made a meme for you guys. This was funny last night. How many of you guys are Star Wars fans? Yeah, some of you? Okay, so I like the medium old Star Wars, but I watched the new movies and they're okay. But so here on the right, we have a male bird of paradise. Looks like a pretty bird, right? He's got some yellow going on, his beak is blue. Intersexual selection is no, that's not good enough, we need more. So male birds of paradise do even more. Maybe you guys have seen the Planet Earth documentary of this specific species where the bird he's doing all these clicking sounds and waving back and forth. You'd think that that's enough. No, Intersexual selection is like, we need more out of the male birds of paradise. I feel bad for these guys, right? This one, it's like good luck escaping a predator or sneaking up on a tundra frog. Like you have so much of this extra plumage, it might actually affect your ability to survive, but it's so important for reproduction. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Why do females care? On an aside, is it just they think that extra feathers are pretty? Why would they, like, does anyone have an idea why the females would choose for this like outrageous colors and feathers and stuff? Any ideas? Yeah. Bingo, yeah. Female doesn't really necessarily care. She's only interested in what genes her offspring are gonna have. So one, if the male can afford to make all these expensive feathers and waste time every day practicing his dance moves, right? That's a pretty good indication that he has good genes. So it's an honest signal of, like, I guess, viability. Really interesting. Let's do another Insta poll. If you could open question number 2. Which of the following scenarios best illustrates the difference between intersexual selection and intrasexual selection? So read over these answer choices, and then maybe in a minute or two we'll talk about it. Okay, maybe take 10 more seconds or so, enter your answers. Yeah, I guess we can go ahead and close it. Okay, does anyone want to say what they thought was the correct answer for this one? What'd you guys put? Someone said D? Yeah, D is correct. So, I mean, some of these are maybe a little bit confusing. We don't have to go through all of them, but the best answer is D, male peacocks displaying a vibrant tail to attract mates. That's intersexual selection. And then male elephant seals fight and battle for access to females. That's an example of intrasexual selection. So.